Hello, welcome back. This is lucky episode number 13. I am Dani Buckley, your host, and I'm here with Shay Smith. And this is the Sell Smarter, Sell Faster livecast. How's it going, Shay? I know you're in Orlando, Florida on vacation.
Yeah, I am. I'm hanging out with the mouse, celebrating my birthday in Disney World. So we got to go to Hollywood Studios yesterday. I rode some of the new Star Wars rides, which was really exciting because I've never gotten to ride in the part of Hollywood Studios called Galaxy's Edge. So that was really exciting on my birthday. Loving it. I got my nice backdrop here from the house we're staying at. So
yeah, it's perfect. Thank you for staying on brand.
yeah, exactly.
Well, awesome. Well, everyone who's joining us, as normal, we love to hear where you're watching from. So drop that in the comments. Always nice to know. And as a reminder, this livecast is powered by Lead G2, where we both work. And Lead G2 is a sales performance agency. We really specialize in using inbound marketing and sales enablement strategies to help organizations sell smarter and sell faster. And that's the name of the game. That's the name of the livecast. And this livecast is really centered around specifically how to really boost your sales enablement at your organization. Specifically, we like to highlight fresh insights, new best practices and real world examples from all kinds of different people in different industries, different areas of expertise. And I'm especially excited about our topic today related to B2B content. But before we get into that, I'll let Shay run us through the important stuff you all need to know about the livecast.
All the important housekeeping things.
Yes,
if it is your first time joining us or your 13th time joining us, I hope that you are subscribed or you will go subscribe to our YouTube channel. That URL is here. Make sure you click subscribe and then click the bell icon to turn those notifications on so you are notified when we go live or any new content we put out. We want you to be a part of the community as we help people sell smarter and sell faster. Again, we do have a website, sellsmartersellfaster.com. On this website, you can find related content that's centered around the topics that we talk about on the livecast. So if we're talking about B2B content or sales enablement, there's always things that we have more resources on from Lead G2 that you might be interested in finding. So you can find those there, past episodes, some of our favorite episodes. You can find that on sellsmartersellfaster.com. Other than that, we hope you will connect with us. You can comment during the show in the comments if you have questions, or you can connect with Dani and myself later on Twitter and LinkedIn. We're always there. We were actually talking to the guest before we came in here. He's like, I'm always on Twitter. And I said, I feel the same way. So connect with us. We want you to be a part of the community. So make sure you're subscribed, comment, ask questions. We love to hear from you. Connect with us. And with that, Dani, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest for today because I'm really excited. I had actually connected with him through marketing Twitter, and I just think he is a wealth of knowledge on B2B, specific B2B marketing and sales tips. So I'm going to open his introduction really quick. Jason Bradwell, he is the host of B2B Better podcast, and he's a marketing director for a global enterprise technology brand. He is on a mission to prove B2B does not have to be boring and helps early stage marketing teams build strategies that scale with their business. Jason hosts a weekly podcast called B2B Better and publishes a newsletter every Monday called the B2B Bite, which I am subscribed and I highly recommend people subscribing. It's a great newsletter, like actual good information. So with that, Dani, I'm going to jump out and bring Jason in, and y'all have a great conversation.
Thanks, Shay. Hey, Jason, how's it going?
Not too bad, Dani. How you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for joining us. I'm excited to jump into one of my favorite topics as well, B2B content.
Well, I've made my career off the back of B2B content. So as you can imagine, it's also one of my favorite subjects to talk about, but really excited to talk with you about this. And thank you so much for inviting me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's jump in. So I'm going to, assume that most folks that are tuning in here from the business world, at least even if they're don't have a solid content strategy at this point, they know they should. I think most of us know they should, and they know that it's important. And it's something, like I said, I'm really passionate about. It's often what I'm speaking about. But I want to kind of hear from you. Why is this something that you are so passionate about, especially why is it important for like driving revenue? Like, what is it about content that you think just matters so much to businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing to say is and to preface is in B2B, it is rare in my experience at least, to see content marketing, or publishing a blog post or publishing a white paper or case study directly translate into revenue, like cause and effect, as a matter of immediacy, right? I certainly have never published something on my blog and then seen a big 6-digit enterprise sale gonna come through the door as a direct result of that. But what it does allow organizations to do is to stay front of mind, nurture relationships, and build credibility over the long term. And that's what's really important in B2B sales. I come from an enterprise background where the sales cycles are anything from 3 months to 3 years. And whilst the cycles are long, the windows of opportunity are very, very small. If you miss the mark in talking or getting in front of a customer at the time they're ready to look at a solution like the one that you provide, then you've possibly missed it for half a decade. And that's where content is really powerful, because it keeps you front of mind. And I look at it a little bit like investing. It compounds over time. The more you put in, without the expectation that, hey, I've been publishing on my blog for 3 months, why am I not seeing sales come through the door? The more you put in, the more you're going to get out over the long run. And another reason is, I think, it's really lowered the barrier of entry for younger B2B brands to compete, with some of the more well-established and longer serving competitors of theirs. In the old days, let's call it 10, 15 years ago, really the only way for B2B brands to get in front of their clients, potential clients, was to either attend a big booth trade show event and spend an absolute fortune for the right to do that, or to put out a press release across the wire, again at a small fortune, and hope that it lands in someone's inbox, or gets featured in a trade pub. With content, if you've got something to say, you can start saying it and getting it in front of your customers immediately. Start a newsletter, start a podcast, start writing on your blog. I hate to say, if you build it, they will come, but to a degree that is true. If what you're saying is really addressing their pain points and offering free, no strings attached value. So that's also why I think it's so important for younger brands in particular in driving revenue. If you don't have the big budgets to compete in ad spend, compete at events, compete from a press paid media standpoint, content's the way to go.
I love that you mentioned that, because it really is like a leveling out. Like, it's a way to compete. And I mean, I've seen it in many different industries where, it's like the smaller guys are actually putting out much better content, very commonly, and therefore growing and taking more and more, piece of the pie, because of that. And so I love that you mentioned that. It's not something I actually think of quite as often. That barrier to entry is a lot lower than if you're trying to compete, like you said, with ad spend or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing, to say to follow on from your point, is a lot of these kind of younger brands are born in the age where kind of content marketing is really table stakes, and there is a lot of stuff out there. I mean, content marketing as a strategy, as a channel, is not new. Every organization, more to some degree, is doing something with regards to content. But these younger companies who are born in a digital age, who have got content marketing almost ingrained in their strategy right from day one, they're the ones, as you say, that are innovating and moving quickly, where perhaps some of their more well-established competitors who are still a little bit too tied up with these big booth trade events and sending out the odd press release, are able to move to as quickly.
Yeah. So you well-established businesses out there, if you're listening, I think it's a good reminder too, because there's folks that are coming in and doing that and are kind of naturally and really effectively doing that, while some people are holding on to these old ways of doing things. We see that a lot. Great points. That was just question one. All right. So,
there we go.
So we touched on my next one, which is really why it's important to the B2B space. But is there anything else you want to add that, like, around just content marketing in general in the B2B world versus maybe B2C?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, content marketing on the B2C side of things, for lack of a better term, is typically more interesting and more engaging. And I think that's just by virtue of they're just being, depending on what kind of product you're selling in B2C, just so much competition and fighting through the noise. So you do see a lot of what I call boring B2B content. And that's why I'm really excited about and passionate about it, in helping marketers and founders, educate themselves on how they can do better B2B marketing. Because whilst there is a lot out there, there's still relatively little good B2B content. And I think that's where there's some real low-hanging fruit to take advantage of. And, what does good B2B content look like? I mean, it can just be throwing a little bit of personality behind what is a very conventional content type. Think of something like product demo videos or explainer videos. Webflow, for example, they do a fantastic job in creating super informative, engaging, 90 second to 2 minute long videos that explain the different features of their products. And lots of companies do that kind of thing. But I was looking for his name, but I couldn't find it before we started recording. Whoever is hosting those videos has got such a distinctive, fun, warm, open, funny personality that it just draws you in more than perhaps any other product video that certainly I've seen. You don't have to do anything particularly crazy to create B2B content. Of course you can. It reminds me of the example of I think it was a company called Gum Gum a few years ago where they commissioned a comic book for the T-Mobile CEO, John Laguerre, I think his name was. And I mean, they went out and actually hired a proper comic book illustrator to create a comic book for him that positioned him as the superhero and Gum Gum's solution as his weapon of choice to combat bad Wi-Fi signal, I think it was. That was obviously pushing it to the extreme of creativity. There's just a huge spectrum that B2B brands can operate in and do things in that make their content better than a lot of the boring fluff out there.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned sometimes it's simple as just having some personality. We find with a lot of business we work with, there's a lot of fear of like having a personality or having like anything that's a little bit slight, not even off the cuff, but just, like has anything that's not like very professional and kind of dry. And so I think it's important that we remember that B2B is still selling to humans, right? It's not like we're not actually selling to a business, like we're still talking to humans. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. So that kind of brings us into the next question. What are the components of, a really solid B2B content strategy? Like what are the key things that you think have to be in there for someone to get it right?
Yeah, I think there are 5 things that you want to include in any kind of solid content strategy, and these aren't exhaustive, right? But I think these are the 5 things that I'd probably start with. The first is a real clear understanding of what is it you're trying to achieve. And this is where I see a lot of kind of B2B companies fall short in executing a successful content strategy. They haven't defined what is the kind of quantifiable North Star business focused metric that we are putting all of our effort and energy in trying to achieve. It's one thing to say, we want to create content that our readers, love to read, or we want to be viewed as the leader in, X industry through our content and demonstrate our credibility that way. And those are all obviously very admirable, and they get everyone pumped up when you're sitting there in the content war room and, trying to brainstorm ideas. But unless there is a number, like a quantifiable number that you can tie everything to, ultimately you're going to end up falling short of your expectations because you don't know really what your expectations are. So I think the first thing is having a very clear idea of what it is that you want to achieve, be specific. The second thing is have something to say. And we've kind of touched on this already, which is there is a lot of kind of, Me Too average content out there in the B2B world where you can see almost, competitors lifting the kind of messaging and copy from their competitors' blog onto their own and just, whacking on a new logo. If you want to cut through, you need to have a unique and differentiated perspective and give a reason for your customers to care enough to take time out of what is probably a very busy day to sit down and read your blog, listen to your podcast, watch your video series. So have something to say. Again, be specific. Third thing, know who you want to say it to. I have sat in countless meetings with colleagues, not from within the marketing or sales department, where, ultimately the message is, hey, we want to say all things to all people. And that is the weakest foundation to build any kind of marketing communication strategy, or not just content. If you are devising a content strategy, you need to know, demographically who it is you're trying to talk to, but also what is driving them, like what are their motivations, both in a professional and a personal context, what gets them out of bed excited in the morning, and what keeps them up at night, and building that out into a buyer persona that you're cross-checking against all of your content ideas to ensure that, hey, yeah, we're answering the questions that this particular person is asking. So again, be specific. have someone specific in mind that you're trying to talk to. Fourth thing is, understanding where they're spending time when they're consuming content. Because, if you're working in, I don't know, professional services, for example, and you know that all of your customers are spending 95% of their day in their inbox, then creating a podcast is, not going to reach them at the scale that you're probably going to need. So, maybe a newsletter is what you want to do. So, understanding where that particular person, and this should go into your buyer persona, is spending their time consuming content is super important. And I'd also just kind of say on top of that, understanding where they're spending time consuming content during work hours is important, but also having a sense of where they're spending time consuming content outside of work hours is something that not too many B2B brands are spending enough time investigating. Because, when that person logs off their computer at the end of the day, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be picking up their mobile phone, scrolling on Instagram, scrolling on TikTok, doing whatever, listening to a podcast, doing whatever. And I'm not saying that those are the kind of environments when someone's clocked out of work hours to be kind of, force feeding them like technical documentation, bottom of the funnel product related content. But it does pose an interesting question for B2B brands. How can we occupy some of that out of work space through our content, which then leads you down more of a conversation around how can we entertain versus how can we educate. So that's something that I think also is important to think about. And the final thing, have the means to create and create well. Everyone thinks they're a writer. Very few people actually are. That's not to say that people who, aren't, born and bred de facto content writers can't contribute to content. They certainly can. But you really need someone, whether that's in-house or external, who is a content creator by trade, I feel, to assist and guide and navigate that creation journey. Because, that is also where a lot of B2B brands fall short in creating kind of boring, fluffy content, is they kind of hand it off to the intern, or they hand it off to a developer who hasn't got the time to really look at it, give it any time, and they just create something that's a little bit half-baked. So those are the 5 things. Have something you want to achieve, be specific. Have something you want to say, be specific. Have someone you want to say it to, be specific. Have an understanding of where that person's consuming their content, be specific in your channel allocation, and then have the means to create and create well.
Got it. So you're saying people should be specific.
If that didn't come through, then yes, that is exactly what I'm saying.
Perfect. No, that's great. Thank you for sharing those. And I know that, a lot of this, when we have these conversations, we're oversimplifying a lot of stuff. Like you said, it's not exhaustive, but those are really good, key, critical components. And so the next question I have is actually same thing. I know, again, we're kind of oversimplifying some things that take a lot more time and energy and context, but for the business leaders who are watching this and who are thinking, okay, you've sold me, I haven't jumped on a content strategy yet, I know I need to, what are some of the initial steps they can take, like right away, to get started? What do you recommend there?
Yeah, I think the thing that I do whenever I'm looking at, developing a new strategy, be this kind of a content strategy, a communication strategy, or, whatever really, I sit down with a blank piece of paper in front of me and I fill out what I call my A to E framework. And the A to E framework is a mechanism in which to kind of clarify your thinking around what it is you're trying to achieve, and start to create some actionable steps to go ahead and achieve that. And that A to E framework used to be called the ABCDE framework, but it was a bit of a mouthful, so I shortened it to A to E. Is built again, on 5 components that map against what we answered in the last question. The first one, A, audience, know who it is that you want to talk to and be as specific as you possibly can. B, what is your belief? What is something that only you as an organization can say, and why should people care? That's typically the hardest thing to nail, because unless you have got a strong story behind what it is you want to create content around, you can't make it up. So that's where people spend, that's where my team spends the most time, is in the belief section. Third, creative. What are the actual assets that we want to produce? Be that blog posts, videos, podcasts, and what are the kind of timelines, stakeholders, and deliverables that are going to be required to pull those artifacts together. 4 is distribution. Once we have those artifacts, where do we want them to live, and how are we going to get them in front of our prospective buyers? And also there is where you can list your call to actions. What's the next step that you want each of these assets to lead your buyer to? How does it link to other parts of your content ecosystem? And of course, timelines. When do you want things to go out? And finally, end result, which is your objective, right? And that should come at the top if you were looking at it chronologically. But I'm a marketer. I love acronyms. So end result came at the end. And again, this is just your quantifiable result, measurable objective that is grounding your strategy in. So the A to E framework, that's where I'd start if I was building a content strategy.
I love it. Is it fair to assume that's something on your website that people could find?
Yes, it is. I just wrote an article about it, I think about a month ago. So yeah.
Shave, I knew she'd pop that up. There's your website. So I'm sure hard to remember exactly that, but I love it. I love a good framework. I love a good acronym, all of it to help us walk through this stuff. So I'm always a big fan of, let's make it actionable. What can people go do? Just start thinking about those things. That seems like a great first step. Great. So to kind of close us out, are there any other key kind of best practices, tips, things that you want to throw out there that we haven't touched on yet for those that are looking to build and execute a B2B content strategy in the next year?
Yeah, absolutely. 2 ideas, and we'll see how we can do with time if I can get them both out. So the first one, I think, is understanding where you can prioritize employee distributed content versus brand distributed content. And what I mean by that is, and you've said it already, Dani, people buy from people. And the collective network of your employee base across social media and just generally is going to be about 10 times the amount of people that are following your brand account. And as marketers, we can sometimes get a bit obsessed with growing the brand profiles and growing the followings of our brand profiles and growing the engagement of our brand profiles. But, people do buy from people. And particularly in the early days of a B2B organization's life cycle where, you don't have any brand visibility or brand awareness, the real wins, the low-hanging fruit are going to come, particularly in the early days, from human-backed content. How can, as a marketer, how can I equip my sales team, for instance, with the assets that they can publish across their own personal channels to the means of driving revenue? I ran an experiment in my organization a couple of months ago. We pulled back from producing video content for our brand LinkedIn account, and instead put all of our effort into creating video content for 3 of our sales colleagues. They published 12 videos, 60-second little snippets talking about hot button topics their customers are asking about. The engagement that those 3 guys got was about 200% more than what we get from our brand channels posting almost the exact same content. And they've got a 1/5 of the size of the audience than we do on social media. So smaller audience, much bigger result. So if you're sleeping on employee distributed, employee created content, you need to wake up, because that, particularly in the early days for a B2B company, is where the opportunity lies.
I love that. That is an amazing tip. And we see something similar in our, it's just, I think people are less likely. And I mean, it's that simple. Like following a brand, engaging with a brand just doesn't feel the same as engaging with a human, right? Seeing a real life person that you may kind of know. It's simple, but it's often overlooked. So that's an awesome tip to close us out. Do you want to squeeze in one more or you feel good?
The other thing I just say is just don't worry about quantity, whether that is the creation of artifacts that you're trying to publish out into the world, whether that is, the number of followers that you're trying to attract to your brand account. Figure out what your North Star metric is and just focus on that and work backwards from that. That was the other thing. I had more to say, but in the interest of time, I'll leave it there.
Well, luckily people can go to your website. Like Shay mentioned, can subscribe to your newsletter, which I love getting, listen to your podcast. So all this wealth of information. Thanks for sharing some of it here. I think we jammed a lot in, but I know there's a lot more that you have. You're really an expert in this area. So thanks for joining us, Jason. It was really a pleasure getting to talk with you about this topic that we both are very passionate about.
Very passionate about it. And don't forget, be specific. Thanks, Dani.
Yes, I love it. Be specific. That's great. You take care. Have a good night. Hey, Shay.
Sorry, I'm muted. Thank you, Jason. I was in the comments sharing all of my amens. Yes, I love B2B content too. Obviously, I'm very involved in our content at our companies. But if you would like to connect with Jason, I do just want to put his information right here to connect with him. This is his website. Again, it's got his newsletter, his podcast, all of his social media connection there. If you'd like to connect with Dani and talk to her, she is also very passionate about B2B content, especially using it in the sales process and, for lead generation, inbound marketing, and all that fun stuff. You can connect with her here. And then I would love to connect with you as well. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter a lot. Unfortunately, sometimes too much. So we'd love to connect with you. And as a reminder, you can go to sellsmarter.sellfaster.com. We have past episodes, related content, a lot of our blog content also around these topics. And then my last reminder for the day, Dani, is make sure you are subscribed. If you like this episode, you can like it, you can share it, you can give us a thumbs up, and you can share our channel with your friends, colleagues, social networks. We're really wanting to grow our family in the Sell Smarter, Sell Faster livecast community. So Dani, tell us about next week.
Yeah, so next week is our last episode of this season of the year. Going to be with Martha Orellana from Mr. Steam, who has been a partner and client of ours for quite a few years. And I can't wait to talk with her about really the power of building relationships. She's a true pro in that area. And we're going to get into things like how to use automation and content and inbound marketing and even your CRM and things like that, all these different tools to build relationships in order to sell smarter and sell faster. So join us next week. And thanks again for joining us today. Have a great day.
Have a great day. Thanks, everyone.